Okay, today we're going to talk about Japan and the Mongols. The Mongols were the last dynasty that kind of took over China. They were the largest dynasty or empire at the time. In fact, they're the largest empire ever that we ever will study. It's bigger than Persia, it's bigger than Greece, bigger than Rome. The Mongols were nomads. What does nomads mean again? They traveled and they didn't really have a specific home, but they lived north of China. Genghis Khan was the granddaddy or the head of that dynasty. He unified the Mongols, got them all together, and then established an empire in China from Russia. He was known as being very, very mean. Okay, this is a picture of Genghis Khan. Again, he was the grandfather, Genghis Khan. They both start with the letter G. Know him as sort of the leader of the Mongol Empire. Okay, look at this picture. What does this picture tell you about the Mongols? Does it tell you that they are a peaceful sort of culture, or that they are a culture that comes in and just takes over and is super mean, kind of like the Assyrians, a very like warlike culture? Go ahead and write it in your slide. Okay, again, important thing to know about the Mongols, they used horses in battle. And they took over lots and lots of civilizations or lots of parts of China in order to gain a very large empire. In fact, they actually controlled most of Asia. What's circled, or in the orange checkbox, you can see is their empire. They took over all of China, all of Mongolia, all of Moscow, which is, Russia. And then of course they didn't touch India, but you can see that entire box of most of Asia was taken over by this land empire of the Mongols. Okay, when Genghis Khan died, his grandson, Kublai Khan, took over the empire. Again, it's just like a dynasty. When one person dies, then the son takes over. In this case, it was the grandson, Kublai Khan, who came later after Genghis' son. He again still has the largest land empire, but now calls it the Yuan dynasty. So you need to know Mongol Empire is also known as the Yuan dynasty. You need to know both names. The Chinese hated the Mongols, partly because they weren't nice people, but they did also allow foreigners on court. And what that means is when you let in people from the outside, you're opening yourself and your empire for other people to invade. When Kublai Khan was running the Yuan dynasty, that's where the important person of Marco Polo, I'm sure you've heard about him. Remember the game you played in the pool when you were growing up, Marco Polo, he is a explorer who explored the Silk Roads. He was around during the Yuan dynasty. Also during the dynasty, trade increased because the Yuan dynasty or Kublai Khan was letting in outsiders to trade up and down the foreign or the Silk Road. Remember, China was very isolated for a very long time. Now they're not being so isolated, but they're opening themselves up to invaders. That's really not that much of a problem because the Mongols are still running their very, very large empire in Asia. Okay, you're going to watch this video. When you're done watching the video, then keep taking notes. Okay, after the Mongols, we have to learn about Japan. This is a separate topic completely. We're not talking about Asia anymore. We're talking about And we're not talking about China anymore. We're talking about a very short couple things I need you to understand and know about Japan. Japan is next to China. Okay, Japan is on the right. It's circled. You can see that Japan is next to China. It's a series of islands. It is not connected. If it were a peninsula, it would have bodies of water on 3 sides. This is an island. It means that there's water on 4 sides. In fact, there's more than 4 islands. Whenever you have more than 4 islands, there's a special name that you need to know. The special name that you need to know for the 4 islands is an archipelago or an archipelago. It just means that Japan is made up of a bunch of islands. In fact, there are 4. You have to remember the vocabulary word of archipelago and Japan. Other archipelagos, Hawaii, Cuba, I'm sure you can think of other archipelagos, but you need to understand that Japan's vocab word to describe it is archipelago. In Japan, they have a special religion called Shintoism. It's very similar to Buddhism. They believe in worship of ancestors. They believe in kami, which is that everything has a spirit. Water has a spirit, air has a spirit, the desks have a spirit, and they believe in nature. So it's similar to Taoism in the fact that they believe in not messing with nature and letting everything go with the flow. Shintoism was the state religion. That means if you lived in Japan, you needed to be Shintoism. It was the state religion. That's like us saying that if you live in the United States, then you must be Buddhist or you must be Christian. And Shintoism got along with Buddhism because it was very similar. They believed in kind of spirits and an afterlife, and they did have a main god. Okay, you're going to watch this video, then go to the next slide. Japan borrowed a lot of the culture from China because it's very close to China. Buddhism spread into China. There wasn't a Silk Road that connected it because there's an ocean in the way, but because it's very similar, they stole a lot of their ideas from the Chinese. They borrowed the writing. They borrowed a lot of the architecture, the buildings. They borrowed a lot of the government ideas. And that's how they figured out how to set up what would work as a government or an empire in Japan. Here's the writing. On the right is Japanese writing, and on the left is Chinese writing. The Japanese writing has lots of kind of flowing circular strokes to it, and in the left, on the Chinese writing, there's a lot of block lettering. But the writing was stolen basically from the Chinese. On the right is a Chinese architecture building, and on the left is the Japanese. The Japanese usually are kind of more pointy, but they look very similar. They are never going to ask you to decide in an SOL or on a test which one is Chinese and which one is Japanese. You just need to know that the Japanese stole the writing and stole the architecture and the government from China because they were the closest neighbors to China. Okay, in Japan, the empire, it was ruled kind of by one person, but eventually individual landowners sort of started building their own armies to protect their land, and they had their own warriors. Their own warriors were called samurais. Samurais are kind of like knights in Europe. They all follow the code of Bushido, and what that means is if you're a samurai, you're expected to be a courageous, fair, generous leader, and you protect the different land empires that are being built up. Samurais looked like this in the next slide. Okay, the samurai is sitting down. He has sort of people that kind of work for him who are also dressed in armor. But the guy sitting in the seat is a samurai. He follows the code of Bushido. And the code of Bushido is just like a special agreement or a code or an oath that they take. He's dressed all in metal to keep him safe in battles. He probably rides a horse. Okay, go ahead and answer that question. What does Japan take from China, and what's one thing that is strictly Japanese? Remember, the only thing you really need to know about Japan is that they took a lot of the architecture and the writing and their government and their religion. There were two religions in Japan, Buddhism and Shintoism. Shintoism is only found in Japan. It is nowhere else in the world. That will definitely be a question that you need to know. Where is Shintoism found? Okay.